Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Rhonda Lauer.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. It's first, I just want to thank all of you who were you really were terrific out there. We had a unexpected room change, and I want to thank you for bearing with us so that we could get everyone who wanted to attend the chronic absenteeism workshop. So thank you for bearing with us. Before I introduce Bill Golderer, I just want to introduce someone else, and that's the person who the Campaign for Grade Level Reading and Foundations, Inc. loves working with at the United Way of Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey, and that is Suzanne O'Connor, their Director of Education. Suzanne. She's great, and thank you for all your help. You really are making this conference great. Thank you. Bill Golderer is a man of many hats. I have learned so much about him. He is the president and CEO of the United Way of Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey, but he is also co-founder of Rooster Soup, which is a restaurant where 100% of the profits support vulnerable Philadelphians. He is founder of the Broad Street Ministry, which enables cross-sector collaboration to tackle hunger and homelessness, and he is an ordained minister. At the United Way, he oversees the organization's work to fight poverty by investing in youth success and family economic stability. Please welcome Bill Golderer. Thank you.
Hey friends, how are you? Okay, that's not the energy that I've seen on Twitter. That was kind of a murmur. So let's try that again. This is a call and response construct for those of you who know what that is. Can I have an amen? Amen. There we go. Thank you. How's everybody doing? All right. Now, one of the things that I've appreciated about being at United Way for these many 5 months, I just got started, is I've been bolstered and buoyed by a lot of things, but one of the things that's been really powerful is to feel like you're not just, in the worst sense, boarding a train that's already moving. That's a disorienting feeling. But boarding a train where there are people who have been deeply committed to addressing structural injustice for years before I got there, and I am honored to join a team of deeply committed and faithful people who are about getting this right for young people. So let me tell you, I want to start by acknowledging Suzanne. I see Sarah's here, McCullough, the Senior Vice President of Impact at United Way, and been a great colleague. But one of the things before I talk to you about what I'm here to talk to you about is I want to take a minute and just say one thing, which is about 5 years ago, I had an opportunity to address lifelong educators it was a national rabbinic conference. And there was a focus where I didn't know, as usual, I didn't know what I was getting into. And I walked in, and it was 2,000 volunteers who had been teaching in synagogues. The average tenure, I was told, was 20 years. And everything that they had heard, and tell me if this resonates with you, is alternated between all the things that we have yet to do, all the hills that we have yet to climb, all the things that our young people deserve, and we have to keep going in order to reach those goals, Alternately, you heard, here are all the headwinds that we're going to confront. These are all the obstacles for our being successful. And here are all the things that we need to know are working against our success. So it's problem and possibility. Here are our challenges, and here are the things we need to know that our North Star is focused on in order for us to be successful. And one of the things that you need to hear from me very clearly, and it was my message then, and it is now, is that there was a time, maybe for some of you it was recent, maybe for some of you it was decades ago, where you heard an invitation inside your spirit that invited you to devote your life to helping children. And for saying yes to that invitation the first day you did, and for every morning when you knew of the problems and you knew of the obstacles and you knew how far yet we had to go, you still got out of bed and said yes again. You need to hear from me on behalf of so many families, thank you for saying yes every day to our kids. I feel like no one takes the time to pause and thank you, because too few times you hear that. Underappreciated, underacknowledged. And I am so grateful that you say yes. That's really what a covenant relationship with. If any of you, I've been married now, as of last week, 15 years. If you're a praying person, pray for that woman. And that's really what this is. Saying yes day after day to the possibilities and also the challenges. I could be done. That would be a good place to stop. But Suzanne wants me to say a couple other things, so I'm going to. The first is that I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to talk with you a little bit about this, because I think that there wasn't, when I began the work that I did at Broad Street Ministry, there wasn't language for what it was that I was observing. And let me tell you a little bit about that work. About 5 blocks from here, there was 6 blocks. There was an abandoned church building that is in a 5-star neighborhood. It's steps from the Ritz-Carlton. It's across the street from the Kimmel Center, where the world's greatest orchestra invites us to elevate our spirits into a place that is lofty and magical. That's what the arts do. And now, today, after kind of a start in 2005, 9,000 unduplicated individuals who are experiencing joblessness, homelessness, hunger, and in some cases, hopelessness, walk through those doors every day, wanting to believe that their future can be better than their present situation. 7,700 of those people receive their mail there. If anybody local here? Raise your hand if you're local. 7,700 is larger than Narberth, right? It's a lot of folk. And what they come in with, and we're trying to turn around, is messages that they have received sometimes since they were children, that they are not valuable, desirable, or welcome. And one of the things that we're all charged with, and thank God you're trying to intervene now, is that is more than all the things that we're trying to understand about what's happening to our children and when people grow up in poverty and then become adults who have always had to deal with less, not just less resources, but less affection, less people around them who believe in them and see a future for them that they may not see for themselves. When you have that compounding day after day, that experience, That's what trauma is. Trauma is when people do not regard you, believe in you, and in some case, because of that, abuse you and defile the holiness that exists within you. Trauma, when you intervene in the life of a child, you have an opportunity for that child to recover, to heal from that trauma, and to be on track with reading, but also to be on track with this positive sense of the future that they can seize. And that's why I want to commend to you, all of you who have embraced this trauma work. I'm a believer in lots of things, and one of the things is I believe deeply that those of you who have kind of dug into the science around trauma-informed care and how it is we engage holistically the child. And when caregivers and people who are charged with helping the child develop understand how important it is that we take into consideration not all the necessarily like physical and material things that a child's facing, but also the socio-emotional things that are holding a child back. When we look at the child whole, we have a new opportunity for those children never to have to walk through the doors of a Broad Street ministry or anywhere else. And that's why I've come to United Way, because I want us to put a stake in the ground, not just in early learning, but also in helping this community seize upon how we need to capitalize approaches to interventions in the child's life before it's too late. So that's one. The second thing I want to just convey to you, and it's related to the first, is I have this really cool, I'm not here to like make you jealous, but I think I'm about to make you jealous. In a couple of months, you heard the preacher thing, and I'm going to try not everybody loves that stuff, so I'm not going to talk about that, but I did get a cool invite. In 2 months or so, I'm going to England. My friend Bishop Curry got the royal wedding. I don't think I was close or in the running for that one. I don't even know how you apply for something like that. I'm free. I'd like to do that. But I am doing something that is pretty interesting that I've been reading up on. The Prime Minister of the British Isles and of England, in the midst of all this Brexit nonsense, has appointed a new cabinet-level position. I don't know if you know about this or read about it. It's the cabinet minister for loneliness. And I'm going over there to preach her, whatever that is. It's the you're official now go do the work, make people less lonely. But what I learned is that this is becoming a place where it has deleterious health effects, how deeply our people all around the world are experiencing deep isolation. And the thing I want you to know is there's real power in you attending this conference. What could possibly be more lonely or isolating than not coming together to be fed, to look around at each other and be like, man, I am not alone in this. People share my concern, and they don't share my concern by liking something on Facebook, which, I don't know if you know this, that actually doesn't help. Oh my gosh, the kids can't read. Some kid somewhere is like, thank God, she liked me. That's not going to turn it around. You have given of your time, you've sacrificed earning that you might have had available to you, and you dug into this problem with passion and dedication, in many cases for years, and you need to keep coming back and look for places where people who share your values and vision convene. It's a way to stave off that deep sense of isolation and loneliness, because we can't possibly undertake the seismic societal change that we all imagine if we're just working away by ourselves. So for those of you who are tempted to like run, you can do this with me because I won't judge you. I'm like a very cool guy like that. But if you feel like you want to rush out and go back to work and check all your email, make an investment in yourself to be here. The kids, their families, your organizations will benefit from your investing in being connected, to staying in touch, to being surrounded by people who share your vision. Because right now, folks, there's probably some conversation going on somewhere else where people are trying to undo the good you're doing. So we need each other. We have to stay connected to each other. Because if we're going to play a long game here, a game where every child who is born into this nation knows that they will be reading on grade level by 4th grade, and we know that that is possible, we need to sustain each other in this work. So thank you for letting me be a small part of the connective tissue that's making our families stronger. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Dayna Long. She's the pediatrician and director of health equity initiatives at UCSF Benioff Hospital in Oakland, California, where she has witnessed firsthand the effects that childhood trauma has had on her young patients. With a specialty in asthma, she founded the hospital's Family Information and Navigation Desk, which helps connect community resources to family needs. She's also the medical spokesperson for Too Small to Fail, Talk, Read, Sing, an initiative of the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. Please welcome Dr. Dayna Long.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm up here to really answer any questions that you have and to have a conversation with you about everything that we've been hearing, certainly in the course of today, but also for those of you like me who have been here for the week, just a time to sort of debrief, reflect, and take a deeper dive. For those of you who I haven't met, as the voice above said, I am a pediatrician at UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital, Oakland, and I'm the medical director for our Department of Community Health and Engagement. Our mission is to create a Bay Area where all children are healthy and thriving. And we do that through research and advocacy policy, clinical innovations. And the work is really inspiring. I actually want to touch on what the pastor just said. When I first started this work, I'm a clinical translational researcher, which means that I actually work in the safety net and I do research on health disparities, on adverse childhood experiences, and then I translate that research, that data, into the clinical context so that we can get sustainable change. And I started this work because I've been a pediatrician for almost 20 years now, and I've been part of my community in Oakland. I feel connected to my community. I did a lot of work in the emergency department, and over and over and over again, I kept seeing Black boys come in dead. And it gets to a point where it's just unsustainable. And you either decide that you're going to leave or you're going to do something to actually change it. And what I realized is that the tools that I learned in medical school weren't actually making my patients better. They weren't preventative and they weren't addressing the social and environmental context that actually leads to the gunshot wounds happening in the first place. And so the problem seemed so big. How do we solve poverty? Where do you start? And then, as the pastor was saying, well-intentioned people, being the naysayers, saying, it's not my job, I don't have time, I don't know what to do about the answers, and it's just too hard. And my response was, well, you know, you got to start somewhere. And so I did, just one foot in front of the other, and the place where we started was in the emergency room because that's where I was working. And we started with, what questions do we ask? Mind you, this was 2011, 2012. What questions do you ask? Is it feasible to ask the questions? How do you ask them, and who asks them? Such very basic questions. We asked questions about, are you concerned about the mental health of the caregiver? Do you run out of money for food? Are you being exposed to violence in your neighborhood homes and schools? And what we found was that there was an immense amount of willingness on the part of our patients to answer the questions, and that the data was, quite frankly, startling. What we found is that when we randomly approached families, we found that almost 60% of our families on any given day were food insecure. They were hungry. We found that half of our families had concerns about the mental health of the primary caregivers. We found that upwards of 40% of our families were concerned about the habitability of their housing and violence in their neighborhoods, homes, and schools. All we did was just start to ask the questions. And then people would say, well, you can't ask the questions unless you're going to do something about it. But we didn't even know what to do. And so after asking the questions, we decided that, well, what do we do? And we're like, well, let's make it up. I realized that I always thought that when you got to a certain level, that there'd be answers, right? Like, okay, well, maybe I'm just a pediatrician in one town, so I don't know. So let me actually go to my region and my state and travel nationally. And I realized that nobody knew. So I decided that, well, I'm just going to make it up, right? If no one knows, I might as well make it up. And so we started piloting interventions. How do we connect families to resources? Do we use community health workers? What are those resources? How often do we follow up with families? Are we actually able to resolve needs? How does it relate to healthcare utilization? How does it relate to healthcare outcomes? And we realized that by combining passion and profession, we actually were able to come up with the answers. And so we became the first pediatric randomized controlled trial to get published in a peer-reviewed journal on social determinants of health. It was a landmark study, and we demonstrated that, yes, you can ask the questions, yes, you can resolve needs, and when you resolve needs, you improve health. It's not rocket science. And then I realized, well, this is all fantastic, but I can't really excel if I'm using Excel. And so how are we going to actually track, and how are we going to strive towards those population-level outcomes? And so nothing existed in the space where I was working. And I'm a pediatrician, right? I'm not a technologist, I'm not a social entrepreneur, but nothing existed. So I said, well, let me make it up. So I created a technology platform that we call Find Connect, which is a cloud-based system that allows us to do the screening, referral, case management, and then we're able to de-identify and aggregate the data so we can look and stratify it on a population level based upon age, ethnicity, or type of need, and how we're resolving those needs, and actually see where our patients are coming from and doing continuous QI. And then the calls started coming in. Can you come here and speak? Can you go to the White House? Can you meet Obama? And I was like, no, I can't do that. I'm just a pediatrician. And I was like, why me? And this is getting to your question, Pastor, right? Like, why me? And I realized that what people need to know is they need to be able to marry the narratives with the data. And it's the narratives matched with the data that helps to drive and inform evidence-based policy. So oftentimes the journey can be really circuitous, but it's really just about putting one foot in front of the other and making small changes at a time. And find your focus, find what the niche is. And I've learned to iterate, and to iterate quickly, and there are times that I've failed, like, that idea really sucked. And each of those opportunities is a learning moment, because then you do a better job the next time. So that's sort of my journey for how I got to be here, and I'm really happy to answer any questions about how you guys can start to make change in your communities, questions about how you do screening, referral, case management, or interventions for ACEs and determinants of health. there are more and more resources that are out there. In terms of resources for how to train teachers, there are a ton that I even just learned about for this conference. We're using a training methodology called Trauma Transformed. You can definitely look up the website, and it teaches a lot about the brain science and how to approach families and how to actually become a more accountable healing organization. There are a lot of different tools on how to screen and what to screen for. And so certainly the Center for Youth Wellness, CYW, has a screen that you can download. The screen that we're using, it's called Find Connect. You can look at findconnect.org. It just depends upon what you want to screen for in your community. And the thing about the work on ACEs is that the biggest buffer is having safe, stable relationships. And so that relationship with that teacher really matters, but it's also the relationship that we have to nurture between the parent and the child. And being able to make sure that, are you addressing the basic needs of the caregivers? Do you have resources to refer the caregivers to mental health, to get them food if they need it, to help with housing? And so I would start actually with one thing, right? See how that goes, and then add another. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Having done this work and having promoted this work, I mean, what sort of interactions are you having with the community to inform it, the schools, other organizations, locally in Oakland?
So this work only happens broadly if there really is cross-sector collaboration, and it's become super important for all of us to get outside of our silos to be successful. There are a couple of really amazing collaborations, and I can think of two off the top of my head. One is that we know that at any given time, we have a very high percentage of our patients that have food insecurity. And we thought about who are the collaborative partners who can help us to address this issue. And we thought of the schools, and we thought of the food banks. We also thought about the urban farmers within our community. So we all got together and met and said, what do we want to do about this problem? And we came up with the most innovative solution that we now have pop-up food pharmacies around our community. And so it's pharmacy, instead of an F, it's a PH because the healthcare institution is one of the partners. And with the food pharmacy, we as physicians can actually give out prescriptions for families who are food insecure to go to the food pharmacy, but it's open to everyone. And it's a way for the food banks to distribute their food. It's a way for the local farmers to come, and the local farmers accept the SNAP, the EBT cards, so families can always get fresh produce, they can get whole grains, and they can get protein. And we were doing screening, and so we were able to look at our population data as to where our families are coming from. And so we host these pop-up farmers markets wherever our families are. The hospital itself hosts it at our location twice a month. And we usually have about 100 families each time come get fresh food. And it's really this extraordinary, really imaginative collaborative. The other cross-sector collaborative that I think will have really profound impact is we reached out to our mayor. And our mayor is a huge advocate for the children in our community and wanted to think about how we can catapult entire generations out of poverty. So we met with our early childhood sector, our Head Start folks, our community-based organizations, elected officials, as well as the health sector. And we thought, how can we actually have a long-term investment plan in order to make sure that future generations don't end up in poverty? And we worked with philanthropists. And so we started an initiative. It's called Oakland Promise. And the first piece of that is called Brilliant Baby. The goal is that every single Medicaid-eligible baby in our city is going to be college-bound. And so we worked with an innovative financing model and philanthropy in order to, during the well visits for Medicaid babies, to actually open up college savings accounts during their well child visits. Those accounts then matriculate as the child grows so that by the time that they're 18 years of age, it will be enough to pay for their college or any kind of vocational training. And it behooves the city because the city can draw down on the interest. We're enrolling kids in community-based organizations, including home visiting. We're enrolling kids in our Head Start. And as a health sector, we're enrolling kids in a pretty rigorous randomized controlled trial so that we can track outcomes. And we're looking at what is financial health, how can doctors talk about it, what are the elements of it that are most important? Is it just setting up the college savings account, or is it combining the college savings account with financial coaches and health coaches within the healthcare setting? So it takes a lot of imagination, but the only way these projects happen is if everyone can add their opinion.
Dana, awesome as usual. Just a quick follow-up to that question, which is the connections to the schools, because you are really the pipeline of these hopefully healthy, developed kids on their way to the regular K through 12 system. And what kinds of interactions do you have with the superintendent and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So in order to answer that question, I'm going to go back a couple of steps and say that this was a gradual process for us as a healthcare system to learn about the intersectionality between health and education and the link between the two. And we started with the very earliest children. And so we actually started secondary to an amazing partnership that we have with the Clinton Foundation. And when Hillary was thinking about what her agenda was for families and children, the brain science and talking, reading, singing was super important to her. And the Clinton Foundation decided that they wanted to have 2 sites that were flagships. They used a church community in Tulsa, and they selected Oakland Children's Hospital as the health flagship for Too Small to Fail. With that support and funding, we were able to really pilot and develop the narrative between the intersection between health and education and the importance of talking, reading, singing, and early numeracy. We were able to train all of our pediatricians on developmentally appropriate scripts to talk to families about. And beyond just giving books from Reach Out and Read, we were talking about what is the messaging that's important and how is that behavior sustained over time. So it was secondary to really that partnership and that understanding about the importance of integrating the educational sector into the health sector that we started to work with OUSD, which is Oakland Unified School District. And now, for instance, this technology platform that I created, we're actually going to be screening all incoming transitional kindergartners and preschoolers within Berkeley Unified School District for unmet basic needs for ACEs and for child and adult mental health issues prior to entering transitional kindergarten. And then for families that screen positive, pairing families up with the family engagement coordinators that are staffed by the schools who are going to work directly with the families. And then we're going to see how this affects absenteeism.
Hi, this is loud. Hi, I'm Emily from Virginia, and I realize we're pretty lucky in Virginia that we have these groups called trauma-informed community networks that provide this sort of cross-sector collaboration from education and health and juvenile justice, and for folks to keep everything working together in this space. And I'm wondering, you're doing so many cross-sector collaborations in Oakland. Do you have backbone organizations that help folks work together and see the value of this collaboration? And how do you avoid duplication and sort of measure that collective impact?
Yeah, so that's a really good question because I think that there's often unintentional duplication of work. People not getting enough outside of their sector to see what's happening in other sectors. And even within our healthcare system, we're a huge pediatric enterprise. Bright spots happen in one clinic that aren't necessarily communicated to another clinic. And so there are some backbone organizations. For instance, for the work on Brilliant Baby, the city itself is the backbone organization for that work. For the adverse childhood experience work that we're doing, we are we created a prospective pediatric screening tool. And then we're collecting biologic specimens on kids to create correlations and risk profiles between how they screen and what their biology is showing. We're in partnership with bench scientists, we're the clinical site, and the Center for Youth Wellness is actually our backbone administrative organization. And then for these trauma-informed networks that we have called Trauma Transformed, it actually is a community-based agency that is the backbone. And so it's very true that every initiative needs to have at least one backbone organization that's fulfilling administrative functions. And those administrative functions are so simple. Someone to help schedule meetings and take notes and hold people accountable.
Measurements across the safety net, and I guess you mentioned earlier you have been working with safety net providers, because we know at United Way how important trauma-informed care is, and so we've integrated into our the organizations that we work with and in our investment cycles, and we're trying to think strategically about what it is we're measuring, because at the end of the day we need to be talking about results and what we're measuring. So I know all of us are struggling with that. So, and because we're not measuring biology or doing DNA samples, it's harder sometimes to come up with those concrete measures. So I'm curious if you guys have them, what you have, actually anybody in the room. Thanks.
Well, I think the measurement is really hard. Our trauma-informed community networks are very organically grown based in the community and what they need, and so they kind of look a little bit different in each community. There is a tool on ACES Connection, milestone tracker, that some of them are using to look at meeting the milestones. And then the next thing that we're doing is we've advocated for for the governor to take a look across all state agencies about how trauma-informed policy and practice is working, and that is just getting kicked off with our new, recently elected governor to look at that state policy level too.
So I think a lot about outcomes as a researcher, and process outcomes are very important, and they're pretty easy to collect. So how many trainings did you have? How many people attended each training? You can do pre and post knowledge type surveys as well. But then you also can look at outcome tracking in terms of patient satisfaction secondary to the trainings. You can even look at cycle times if you're talking about pediatric practice. So does a trauma-informed organization actually function more efficiently? And so are you able to actually move patients through the system? And if you can actually prove that by being trauma-informed you can increase efficiency, then that's a huge return on investment that you can actually use then to go to the governor and say, we need to do these trainings because by doing the work of equity, we actually are not only improving health, but we're improving patient satisfaction and we're improving efficiency.
Dayna, can nurses, school nurses and counselors administer an ACEs type instrument?
So there are a lot of different opinions, and I think that many of them are really valid about who administers the ACEs screen. So absolutely, the answer is yes. In my clinic, it's actually the community health workers that are administering the screen. I think that any person that's trauma-informed and has the ability to actually sit with the family and help to process the screen could administer it. I certainly don't think that it needs to necessarily be the job of the pediatrician or the therapist.
Thank you.
Just so everybody knows, if you follow Foundations Inc. on Twitter, I posted there's a trauma toolkit. It's free by First Book has created it. So for any educators out there, it's a wonderful toolkit for teachers and educators to use. So check it out.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Long? Okay, would you please join? Oh, sorry. Is there one, John? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Go ahead.
You've spoken a lot about health and literacy, and I know many of us have difficulty impacting pediatricians or getting their buy-in into our movements. Can you speak a little bit to that?
So, as pediatricians, we are very clear sort of what our traditional job has been, and we are typically paid on these productivity models, right? Like you have to see so many patients. And I think that the hook that I would use for approaching a healthcare system, it's that the practice itself is rooted in the science, and that brain development happens during really the first 3 to 5 years, and that if we can actually provide interventions that improve literacy and numeracy early on, you will improve kindergarten readiness, and this is both a health issue as well as an education issue. I think that the adaptation of early literacy programming is often difficult in pediatric practice if it's not very scripted, and if you don't have clear toolkits and operational flows and algorithms for how it can get incorporated into pediatric practice. And so the way that we have created the workflows in my clinic after piloting Too Small to Fail and Reach Out and Read is that we have designated visits during the Well Child series where we actually talk about literacy and numeracy. So we decided that as pediatricians, particularly those of us that work in safety nets and draw down from Medicaid reimbursement, that we have standard times where we see kids and where we get reimbursed. And so it's 2, 4, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 24, 36, 4 years old, 5 years old, right? Those are the touch points that we have that we can draw down on billable Medicaid visits. The best time to actually introduce the concept of literacy, obviously you want to talk about talking, reading, singing from birth. But to really hone in on developmental screening and to give out our literacy toolkits, we actually do that at the 9-month visit because that's a shot-free visit and there's more time during that visit. When we want to talk about the early numeracy, we landed on the 18-month visit because again, that's not a visit where we do, usually we do the ASQ at 15 months or 30 months, and so the 18-month visit was relatively free. And so being able to actually pinpoint and say, we want you to pass this out at this visit, here is the toolkit, and here is what you need to say, and this is who needs to do the work. You have to be very, very concrete in order to actually make it sustainable.
Any more? Okay, I'm going to wind it up and say, this woman, I have to tell you, from the moment she walked in here, from the moment you meet her, she is so amazing. And if every pediatrician was like Dr. Dayna Long, look what our kids would have. Oh, they would be way up there. We love you. Thank you. Okay, enjoy the rest of your time at the institutes where we are diving deeper into trauma-informed practice, and also try to catch that NFL playbook too. That's going to be great today, and character development. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.